poem every aspect of nature? Or did they spend their time eating, drinking, and telling stories to each other and to the animals? In either case, there would be no difficulty in answering. But as Plato mischievously adds, nobody knows what they did, and therefore the doubt remains unresolved. The first epoch is followed by a second. After another natural upheaval, in which the order of the world and human life is once again reversed, God withdraws his guidance, and humans are left to govern themselves. The world begins anew, and arts and laws are slowly and painfully invented. A secular age replaces a theocratic one. In this imaginative tale, Plato has dropped, or almost dropped, the use of mythology. He suggests several interesting and important ideas, such as the possibility of a state of innocence, the existence of a world without traditions, and the difference between human and divine governance. He has also taken a step further in his speculations about the abolition of the family and property, which he believes have no place among the children of Cronos, just as they have no place in the ideal state. It is characteristic of Plato and his era to move from the abstract to the concrete, from poetry to reality. Language expresses both what is seen and what is unseen, moving in the space between them. A great writer knows how to strike both chords, sometimes staying within the realm of the visible and other times encompassing a broader range and soaring to the abstract and universal. Even in the same sentence, they may use both modes of speech without impropriety or disharmony. Criticizing Plato's use of broken metaphors is pointless if the overall effect is to create a vivid picture that cannot be painted on canvas but is full of life and meaning for the reader. A poem can be contained in a word or two, evoking not just one but many hidden images, or partially revealing to us the thoughts of many hearts with a sudden flash. The rapid transition from one image to another often pleases us. On the other hand, if a single figure of speech is repeated too often or elaborated upon excessively, it becomes dull and monotonous. In theology and philosophy, we necessarily include both the moral law within and the starry heaven above, and move from one to the other. Compare, for example, Psalms 18 and 19. Whether such use of language is childish or noble depends on the genius of the writer or speaker and the familiarity of the associations used. In Plato's myths and parables, the art of conversation is not forgotten. These stories are spoken, not written, and are told to a live audience. They are so well told that we are inclined to believe them. Just like in a conversation, striking figures of speech are used and referred to repeatedly, just as they would be in a friendly and understanding society today. Plato's descriptions have more life and reality than modern writing because of their simplicity and relatability. Plato has complete control over words. They are incredibly flexible to him. He has found a way to unite speech and writing, poetry and prose, to express profound truths while also incorporating the courtesies and familiarities of daily life. This passage is from Plato's dialogue Gorgias and is translated by Benjamin Jowett. The dialogue takes place in the house of Callicles, where Socrates, Chaerephon, Gorgias, and Polus are present. Callicles mentions that Gorgias has just given an impressive exhibition. Socrates explains that they were late because Chaerephon kept them in the agora. Chaerephon offers to make Gorgias give the exhibition again. Socrates expresses his desire to hear from Gorgias about the nature of his art and what he teaches. Callicles confirms that Gorgias is willing to answer any questions. Socrates suggests that Chaerephon asks Gorgias who he is. Chaerephon asks Gorgias if it is true that he can answer any question. Gorgias confirms and adds that it has been a long time since someone asked him a new question. Chaerephon then asks what Gorgias should be called if he possessed the skills of his brother Herodicus. Polus interrupts and suggests that he can answer questions as well as Gorgias. Chaerephon asks Polus what Gorgias should be called if he had the skills of other artists. Polus agrees with Chaerephon's suggestions. Chaerephon then asks what art Gorgias is skilled in. Polus starts to give a lengthy response, praising Gorgias and his art, but Socrates interrupts and says that Polus has not answered the question. Socrates asks Gorgias directly what his art is and what he should be called. Gorgias responds that his art is rhetoric.
So, should I call you a public speaker, Gorgias?
Yes, Socrates, and a skilled one at that, if you would refer to me as I boast myself to be in the language of Homer.
I would like to do so.
Then please go ahead.
And can we say that you are able to make others into public speakers?
Yes, that is exactly what I claim to do, not only in Athens, but everywhere.
And will you continue to ask and answer questions, Gorgias, as we are currently doing, and save the longer speeches for later, like Polus attempted? Will you keep your promise and answer the questions concisely?
Some answers, Socrates, require more explanation, but I will do my best to keep them as short as possible, as part of my profession is to be concise.
That is what we want, Gorgias. Show us your concise method now, and the longer one another time.
Very well, I will do that, and you will surely say that you have never heard a man use fewer words.
Excellent. Since you claim to be a public speaker and to make others into public speakers, let me ask you, what is rhetoric concerned with? Just as I could ask what weaving is concerned with, and you would reply, making garments?
Yes.
And music is concerned with composing melodies?
That's correct.
By Hera, Gorgias, I admire how brief your answers are.
Yes, Socrates, I pride myself on that.
I'm glad to hear it. Now, answer me in the same concise manner about rhetoric. What is rhetoric concerned with?
It is concerned with discourse.
What kind of discourse, Gorgias? Is it the kind of discourse that teaches the sick how to get well?
No.
So, rhetoric does not deal with all kinds of discourse?
Certainly not.
And yet rhetoric enables people to speak?
Yes.
And to understand what they speak about?
Of course.
But doesn't the art of medicine, which we just mentioned, also enable people to understand and speak about the sick?
Certainly.
So, medicine also deals with discourse?
Yes.
Discourse about diseases?
Exactly.
And doesn't physical education also deal with discourse about the good or bad condition of the body?
Very true.
The same is true for other arts, Gorgias. They all deal with discourse about the subjects they are concerned with.
Clearly.
Then why, if you call rhetoric the art that deals with discourse, and all the other arts also deal with discourse, don't you call them arts of rhetoric?
Because, Socrates, the knowledge of other arts is only concerned with some kind of external action, like using our hands. But rhetoric does not involve such physical action, it works and has an effect only through discourse. That's why I say that rhetoric deals with discourse.
I'm not entirely sure if I understand you, but I'm sure I will soon. Please answer this question. Do you agree that there are arts?
Yes.
Most arts are primarily concerned with doing and require little or no speaking. In painting, sculpture, and many other arts, the work can be done in silence. I suppose you would say that these arts are not within the realm of rhetoric.
You understand me perfectly, Socrates.
But there are other arts that work mainly through language and require little or no action. For example, the arts of arithmetic, calculation, geometry, and playing checkers. In some of these, speech is almost as important as action, but in most of them, words are the main focus. They rely entirely on words for their effectiveness and power. I understand that rhetoric is an art of this kind, correct?
Exactly.
Yet, I don't believe that you actually consider any of these arts to be rhetoric. Although you said that rhetoric is an art that works and has an effect only through discourse, an opponent could argue, so, Gorgias, you call arithmetic rhetoric? But I don't think you actually consider arithmetic to be rhetoric any more than you would call geometry rhetoric.
You are completely right, Socrates, in understanding my meaning.
Well, now please give me the rest of your answer. Since rhetoric is one of those arts that primarily uses words, and there are other arts that also use words, tell me, what is the specific quality of words that rhetoric is concerned with? Suppose someone asks me about one of the arts I mentioned earlier. They might ask, Socrates, what is arithmetic? And I would reply, as you did to me, that arithmetic is one of those arts that is carried out through words. And then they might ask, words about what? And I would answer, words about odd and even numbers, and how many of each there are. And if they asked, what is the art of calculation? I would say, that is also one of the arts that is primarily concerned with words. And if they further asked, concerned with what? I would reply, like the clerks in the assembly, as previously mentioned about arithmetic, but with a difference. The difference is that the art of calculation considers not only the quantities of odd and even numbers, but also their numerical relationships to themselves and to each other. And suppose, again, I were to say that astronomy is only words, he would ask, words about what, Socrates? And I should answer, that astronomy tells us about the motions of the stars and sun and moon, and their relative speed.
You would be quite right, Socrates.
And now let us have from you, Gorgias, the truth about rhetoric, which you would admit, would you not, to be one of those arts which act always and fulfill all their ends through the medium of words.
True.
Words which do what? I should ask. To what class of things do the words which rhetoric uses relate?
To the greatest, Socrates, and the best of human things.
That again, Gorgias, is ambiguous. I am still in the dark, for which are the greatest and best of human things? I dare say that you have heard men singing at feasts the old drinking song, in which the singers enumerate the goods of life, first health, beauty next, thirdly, as the writer of the song says, wealth honestly obtained.
Yes, I know the song, but what is your drift?
I mean to say, that the producers of those things which the author of the song praises, that is to say, the physician, the trainer, the moneymaker, will at once come to you, and first the physician will say, O Socrates, Gorgias is deceiving you, for my art is concerned with the greatest good of men and not his. And when I ask, who are you? He will reply, I am a physician. What do you mean? I shall say, do you mean that your art produces the greatest good? Certainly, he will answer, for is not health the greatest good? What greater good can men have, Socrates? And after him the trainer will come and say, I too, Socrates, shall be greatly surprised if Gorgias can show more good of his art than I can show of mine. To him again I shall say, who are you, honest friend, and what is your business? I am a trainer, he will reply, and my business is to make men beautiful and strong in body. When I have done with the trainer, there arrives the moneymaker, and he, as I expect, will utterly despise them all. Consider Socrates, he will say, whether Gorgias or anyone else can produce any greater good than wealth. Well, you and I say to him, and are you a creator of wealth? Yes, he replies. And who are you? A moneymaker. And do you consider wealth to be the greatest good of man? Of course, will be his reply. And we shall rejoin, yes, but our friend Gorgias contends that his art produces a greater good than yours. And then he will be sure to go on and ask, what good? Let Gorgias answer. Now I want you, Gorgias, to imagine that this question is asked of you by them and by me, what is that which, as you say, is the greatest good of man, and of which you are the creator? Answer us.
That good, Socrates, which is truly the greatest, being that which gives to men freedom in their own persons, and to individuals the power of ruling over others in their several states.
And what would you consider this to be?
What is there greater than the word which persuades the judges in the courts, or the senators in the council, or the citizens in the assembly, or at any other political meeting? If you have the power of uttering this word, you will have the physician your slave, and the trainer your slave, and the moneymaker of whom you talk will be found to gather treasures, not for himself, but for you who are able to speak and to persuade the multitude.
Now I think, Gorgias, that you have very accurately explained what you conceive to be the art of rhetoric, and you mean to say, if I am not mistaken, that rhetoric is the artificer of persuasion, having this and no other business, and that this is her crown and end. Do you know any other effect of rhetoric over and above that of producing persuasion?
No, the definition seems to me very fair, Socrates, for persuasion is the chief end of rhetoric.
Then hear me, Gorgias, for I am quite sure that if there ever was a man who entered on the discussion of a matter from a pure love of knowing the truth, I am such a one, and I should say the same of you.
What is coming, Socrates?
I will tell you, I am very well aware that I do not know what, according to you, is the exact nature, or what are the topics of that persuasion of which you speak, and which is given by rhetoric, although I have a suspicion about both the one and the other. And I am going to ask, what is this power of persuasion which is given by rhetoric, and about what? But why, if I have a suspicion, do I ask instead of telling you? Not for your sake, but in order that the argument may proceed in such a manner as is most likely to set forth the truth. And I would have you observe, that I am right in asking this further question. If I asked, what sort of a painter is Zeuxis, and you said, the painter of figures, should I not be right in asking, what kind of figures, and where do you find them?
Certainly.
And the reason for asking this second question would be, that there are other painters besides, who paint many other figures.
True.
But if there had been no one but Zeuxis who painted them, then you would have answered very well.
Quite so.
Now I want to know about rhetoric in the same way. Is rhetoric the only art which brings persuasion, or do other arts have the same effect? I mean to say, does he who teaches anything persuade men of that which he teaches or not?
He persuades, Socrates, there can be no mistake about that.
Once again, let's consider the arts we were just discussing. Doesn't arithmetic and the arithmeticians teach us about numbers?
Yes, they do.
And they persuade us of these properties?
Yes, they do.
So, arithmetic, like rhetoric, is an art that persuades?
Yes, that's clear.
And if someone asks us what kind of persuasion and about what, we would answer that it's persuasion that teaches about odd and even numbers. And we can show that all the other arts we were discussing earlier are also persuaders, and we can explain what kind of persuasion and about what.
That's very true.
So, rhetoric is not the only art that persuades?
That's correct.
Since other arts also use persuasion, like painting, a fair question arises: what kind of persuasion is rhetoric the art of, and about what? Is that a fair way to ask the question?
I think so.
If you agree with the question, Gorgias, what is your answer?
I answer, Socrates, that rhetoric is the art of persuasion in courts of law and other assemblies, as I just said, and it's about justice and injustice.
That's what I suspected your answer would be, Gorgias. But don't be surprised if I ask a seemingly simple question later. I'm not trying to refute you, but I want the argument to proceed logically and without us anticipating each other's meanings. I want you to develop your views in your own way, regardless of your hypothesis.
I think you're right, Socrates.
Let me ask another question. Is there such a thing as having learned?
Yes, there is.
And is there also having believed?
Yes, there is.
Are having learned and having believed the same thing? Are learning and belief the same?
In my opinion, Socrates, they are not the same.
And your opinion is correct, as you can see in this way. If someone were to ask you, Gorgias, is there false belief as well as true belief, you would answer, I believe that there is.
Yes.
Well, is there false knowledge as well as true knowledge?
No.
No, indeed. And this proves once again that knowledge and belief are different.
That's very true.
But both those who have learned and those who have believed are persuaded, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So, shall we assume that there are two types of persuasion? One that leads to belief without knowledge, and another that leads to knowledge?
Yes, definitely.
And which type of persuasion does rhetoric create in courts of law and other assemblies about justice and injustice? Is it the persuasion that leads to belief without knowledge or the one that leads to knowledge?
Clearly, Socrates, it's the one that only leads to belief.
So, it seems that rhetoric is the art that creates a persuasion that leads to belief about justice and injustice, but it doesn't provide any instruction about them.
That's true.
And the rhetorician doesn't instruct the courts of law or other assemblies about what is just and unjust. Instead, they create belief about these matters. It's not possible for someone to instruct such a large group about such important matters in a short time.
Certainly not.
Now, let's examine what we really mean about rhetoric. I still don't know what my own meaning is. When the assembly gathers to elect a physician, shipwright, or any other craftsman, will they consult a rhetorician? I don't think so. They should choose the most skilled person for the job. And when walls or harbors or docks need to be built, it's not the rhetorician who advises, but the master workman. And when generals need to be chosen or battle strategies need to be planned, it's the military experts who advise, not the rhetoricians. What do you think, Gorgias? Since you claim to be a rhetorician and a teacher of rhetoricians, I think it's best to learn about the nature of your art from you. Let me assure you that I have your best interest in mind as well as my own. There may be some young men here who would like to become your students, and I see quite a few who have this desire, but they may be too shy to question you. So, when I ask you questions, imagine that it's these young men who are asking. They might say, What's the use of coming to you, Gorgias? What will you teach us to advise the state about? Only justice and injustice, or the other things that Socrates just mentioned? How would you answer them?
I appreciate your approach, Socrates, and I will try to reveal the whole nature of rhetoric to you. You may have heard that the docks, walls, and harbor plans of the Athenians were devised based on the advice of Themistocles and Pericles, not the builders themselves.
That's the tradition about Themistocles, and I myself heard Pericles' speech when he advised us about the middle wall.
And you will notice, Socrates, that in such matters, it's the rhetoricians who are the advisors and who win their case.
I had that in mind when I asked about the nature of rhetoric. When I look at it this way, rhetoric always appears to be a marvelous art of persuasion.
Socrates, it is truly remarkable how rhetoric encompasses and controls all the lesser arts. Let me give you an example. I have convinced patients, who refused medical treatment from physicians like my brother Herodicus, to comply with their prescriptions simply through the use of rhetoric. If a rhetorician and a physician were to compete for the position of state physician in a city assembly, the physician would have no chance. The rhetorician, on the other hand, could easily be chosen due to their ability to persuade the multitude on any subject. Such is the power of rhetoric. However, rhetoric should be used like any other competitive art. The rhetorician should not abuse their strength, just as a boxer or fencer would not harm their friends. Imagine a skilled boxer who, in their full strength, strikes their own family or friends. That does not mean the trainers or fencing masters should be hated or banished. They taught their art for a good purpose, for self-defense against enemies and wrongdoers. It is those who pervert their teachings and use their skills for harm that are to blame. The same applies to rhetoric. The rhetorician can speak against anyone and on any subject, persuading the multitude as they please. But they should not seek to defraud other professionals, like physicians, of their reputation simply because they have the power. Rhetoric should be used fairly, just as one would use their athletic abilities. If a rhetorician misuses their skills, it is the rhetorician themselves who should be held accountable, not their instructor.
Gorgias, you and I have both had extensive experience in debates. You must have observed that they do not always end in mutual understanding or a clear definition of the subjects being discussed. Disagreements often arise, with one party accusing the other of speaking untruthfully or unclearly. This leads to anger and quarrels, with both sides believing their opponents argue out of personal feelings and jealousy, rather than genuine interest in the issue at hand. Sometimes, these arguments continue until the audience becomes annoyed with themselves for listening to such individuals. I mention this because I find your current statements somewhat inconsistent with what you initially said about rhetoric. I hesitate to point this out, fearing you might think I have animosity towards you and that I speak not to discover the truth, but out of jealousy. If you are open to it, I would like to question you further. If not, I will leave it be. And what do I mean by my sort? I am one who welcomes being refuted if I say something untrue and is equally ready to refute others if they speak falsely. I believe that being corrected of a great error is a greater gain than correcting someone else. For I believe there is no greater evil than holding incorrect opinions about the matters we discuss. If you consider yourself to be of my sort, let us continue the discussion. If not, it doesn't matter, we can end it here.
Socrates, I would say that I am indeed the kind of person you describe. However, perhaps we should consider the audience. Before you arrived, I already gave a lengthy presentation, and if we continue, the argument could become very long. Therefore, we should consider whether we might be keeping some of the audience here when they have other things to attend to.
Gorgias and Socrates, you can hear the audience cheering, indicating their desire to listen to you. As for myself, I have no business that would take me away from such an interesting and well-maintained discussion.
By the gods, Carafin, even though I have attended many discussions, I don't think I've ever been so delighted before. So please, continue speaking all day, I would be pleased.
I can honestly say, Callicles, that I am willing to continue if Gorgias is.
After all this, Socrates, I would be disgraced if I refused, especially since I have promised to answer anyone who challenges me. So, in accordance with the wishes of the company, you may begin and ask me any question you like.
Let me tell you, Gorgias, what surprises me in your words. Although I may have misunderstood your meaning, you claim that you can make any man a rhetorician if he learns from you?
Yes.
Do you mean that you will teach him to persuade the masses on any subject, not through instruction but through persuasion?
Exactly.
So you are saying that the rhetorician will have more persuasive power than even a physician when it comes to matters of health?
Yes, with the masses, that is.
By masses, you mean the ignorant, because those who are knowledgeable cannot be persuaded more by a rhetorician than by someone who actually knows?
That's correct.
But if the rhetorician has more persuasive power than the physician, then he must have more power than someone who knows?
Certainly.
Even though he is not a physician himself, is that right?
No.
And someone who is not a physician must obviously be ignorant of what the physician knows.
Clearly.
So, when the rhetorician is more persuasive than the physician, it means that the ignorant person is more persuasive with other ignorant people than someone who has knowledge. Is that the conclusion?
In the hypothetical scenario, yes.
And the same applies to rhetoric in relation to other arts. The rhetorician doesn't need to know the truth about things, but only needs to find a way to persuade the ignorant that he knows more than those who actually know.
Yes, Socrates, and isn't that a great comfort? To have only learned rhetoric and yet be considered no less than the experts in other fields?
Whether the rhetorician is truly inferior or not on this account is a question we can examine later if it is likely to be of any use to us. But for now, let's start by asking whether the rhetorician is as ignorant of justice, injustice, good, evil, and other moral concepts as he is of medicine and other arts. In other words, does he truly understand what is good and evil, just and unjust, honorable and base, or does he simply have a way of persuading the ignorant that he knows more about these things than someone who actually knows? Must the student already know these things and come to you with that knowledge before acquiring the art of rhetoric? If the student is ignorant, you, as the teacher of rhetoric, will not teach him since it's not your responsibility. Instead, you will make him appear knowledgeable to the masses even though he is not. Or is it impossible for you to teach him rhetoric at all unless he already knows the truth about these things? What can be said about all this? By heavens, Gorgias, I wish you would reveal to me the power of rhetoric, as you said you would.
Well, Socrates, I suppose if the student happens not to know these things, he will have to learn them from me as well.
Say no more, for you are right. So, the one you make a rhetorician must either already know the nature of justice and injustice, or he must be taught by you.
Certainly.
Well, isn't someone who has learned carpentry a carpenter?
Yes.
And someone who has learned music is a musician.
Yes.
And someone who has learned medicine is a physician, right? In the same way, anyone who has learned anything becomes what their knowledge makes them.
Certainly.
So, someone who has learned what is just, correct?
Of course.
And it can be assumed that a just person will do what is just.
Yes.
And the just person will never agree to do injustice, right?
Definitely not.
And according to our argument, the rhetorician must be a just person?
Yes.
Therefore, the rhetorician will never be willing to do injustice.
Clearly not.
But do you remember saying earlier that the trainer is not to be blamed or banished if the boxer misuses his boxing skills? And similarly, if the rhetorician uses his rhetoric in a bad and unjust way, that should not be attributed to the teacher. Instead, the wrongdoer himself, who misused his rhetoric, should be banished. Wasn't that said?
Yes, it was.
But now we are claiming that the aforementioned rhetorician will never commit injustice at all?
True.
And at the very beginning, Gorgias, it was said that rhetoric deals with discourse, not with things like odd and even numbers in arithmetic, but with concepts of justice and injustice. Wasn't that said?
Yes.
At that time, when I heard you say that, I was thinking that rhetoric, which always discusses justice, could not possibly be an unjust thing. But when you added, shortly afterwards, that the speaker might misuse rhetoric, I noticed the inconsistency in your argument. I said that if you believed, like me, that being refuted can be beneficial, then it would be advantageous to continue the discussion. But if not, I would stop. As we have discovered in our investigation, the speaker has been recognized as incapable of using rhetoric unjustly or being willing to commit injustice. By the gods, Gorgias, there will be a lot of debate before we uncover the truth of all this.
Socrates, do you truly believe what you're saying about rhetoric? What? Because Gorgias was reluctant to deny that the speaker knows justice, honor, and goodness, and admitted that he could teach someone ignorant of these virtues, does that mean there is any truth to this? Do you seriously believe that? No one would admit that they don't know or can't teach the nature of justice. The truth is, it's impolite to bring the argument to this point.
Illustrious Polus, the reason we have friends and children is so that when we stumble in our words and actions, a younger generation can help us back up. And now, if Gorgias and I are stumbling, you are here to raise us up. I promise to retract any error you think I have made, on one condition.
What condition?
That you shorten your long speeches.
What? You mean I can't use as many words as I want?
Just consider, my friend. You've come to Athens, the most free-spoken state in Greece, and you alone are deprived of the power of speech. That would be unfair. But think about my situation. Will I not be treated unfairly if, while you make a long speech and refuse to answer questions, I am forced to stay and listen? I suggest that if you have a genuine interest in the argument, or if you want to make it stronger, you can take back any statement you want. Then you can ask and answer, like Gorgias, and I refute and be refuted. I assume you claim to know what Gorgias knows, right?
Yes.
And like him, you invite anyone to ask you anything, and you know how to answer?
Of course.
So, what will you do, ask or answer?
I will ask. Socrates, answer me the same question you believe Gorgias cannot answer. What is rhetoric?
Do you mean what kind of art?
Yes.
To tell the truth, Polus, I don't think it's an art at all.
Then what do you think rhetoric is?
According to a book I recently read of yours, you claim to have made it an art.
What thing?
I would say it's a kind of experience.
Do you think rhetoric is an experience?
That's my view, but you may have a different opinion.
An experience in what?
An experience in producing pleasure and gratification.
And if rhetoric can satisfy others, isn't it a good thing?
What are you saying, Polus? Why are you asking if rhetoric is good or not when I haven't told you what rhetoric is yet?
Didn't I hear you say that rhetoric is a kind of experience?
Will you, who are so eager to please others, grant me a small favor?
I will.
Will you ask me, what kind of art is cooking?
What kind of art is cooking?
Cooking is not an art at all, Polus.
Then what is it?
I would say it's an experience.
In what?
An experience in producing pleasure and gratification, Polus.
So, are cooking and rhetoric the same?
No, they are just different parts of the same profession.
What profession?
I'm afraid the truth may sound impolite, and I hesitate to answer, fearing that Gorgias might think I'm mocking his profession. I really can't tell if this is the rhetoric that Gorgias practices. From what he just said, it's unclear what he thinks of his art. But the rhetoric I'm referring to is just a part of a not very respectable whole.
A part of what, Socrates? Say what you mean, don't worry about me.
In my opinion, Gorgias, the whole of which rhetoric is a part, is not an art at all, but rather the skill of cleverly managing people. I sum up this skill as flattery, and I believe it has many other parts. One of them is cooking, which may seem like an art, but is actually just routine and not an art. Another part is rhetoric, and there are also the arts of dressing up and sophistry. So, there are 4 branches, each corresponding to something different. And Polus may ask, if he wants to, because he hasn't been informed yet, what role flattery plays in rhetoric. He didn't realize that I hadn't answered him yet when he asked another question, do I not think rhetoric is a good thing? But I won't tell him whether rhetoric is good or not until I first answer, what is rhetoric? Because that wouldn't be right, Polus. But I'll be happy to answer if you ask me, what role does flattery play in rhetoric?
I will ask, and you answer. What role does flattery play in rhetoric?
Will you understand my answer? Rhetoric, in my view, is the imitation or counterfeit of a part of politics.
And is it noble or ignoble?
Ignoble, I would say, if I have to answer, because I call bad things ignoble. Although I doubt if you understood what I was saying earlier.
Indeed, Socrates, I can't say that I understand myself.
I'm not surprised, Gorgias, because I haven't explained myself yet, and our friend Polus, who is named after a colt, tends to run away.
Never mind him, but explain to me what you mean when you say that rhetoric is the counterfeit of a part of politics.
I will try to explain my idea of rhetoric, and if I'm wrong, my friend Polus can refute me. Can we assume the existence of bodies and souls?
Of course.
Would you also agree that there is a good condition for both of them?
Yes.
But this condition may not be truly good, only appearing to be good. I mean, there are many people who appear to be healthy, but only a doctor or trainer can see that they're not actually healthy at first glance.
True.
And this applies not only to the body, but also to the soul. In both, there may be something that appears to be healthy but isn't actually healthy.
Yes, definitely.
Now I will try to explain more clearly what I mean. Since the soul and body are two separate entities, there are two arts that correspond to them. There is the art of politics that deals with the soul, and another art that deals with the body, which I don't have a specific name for, but can be described as having two divisions, one for physical training and the other for medicine. In politics, there is a legislative part, which corresponds to physical training, just as justice corresponds to medicine. The two parts overlap, as justice deals with the same subject as legislation, and medicine deals with the same subject as physical training, albeit with some differences. Now, since there are these four arts, two for the body and two for the soul, aimed at their highest good, flattery, knowing or rather guessing their nature, has divided itself into four counterfeits or imitations. It takes on the appearance of one of these arts and pretends to be what it imitates. It has no regard for people's highest interests and constantly uses pleasure to deceive the unwary, making them believe that it is of great value to them. Cooking pretends to be medicine and claims to know what food is best for the body. And if a doctor and a cook were to compete in front of children or people with no more sense than children, to determine who understands the quality of food better, the doctor would starve to death. I consider this to be a form of flattery, and an ignoble one, Polus, since it aims at pleasure without considering the best interests. I don't consider it an art, but only an experience, because it can't explain or provide a reason for its own practices. I don't consider anything irrational to be an art. But if you disagree with me, I'm prepared to argue in defense of my words. So, I maintain that cooking is a form of flattery that disguises itself as medicine. And makeup, in the same way, is a form of flattery that disguises itself as physical training. It is deceitful, false, ignoble, and unrefined, using lines, colors, enamels, and clothing to deceive and make people strive for a false beauty, neglecting the true beauty that comes from physical training. I don't want to be long-winded, so I'll just say, in the manner of mathematicians, because I think by now you'll be able to follow, that makeup is to physical training as sophistry is to legislation, and cooking is to medicine as rhetoric is to justice. This, I say, is the natural difference between a rhetorician and a sophist, but because they are closely related, they tend to be mixed up. They don't know what to make of themselves, and others don't know what to make of them. Because if the body governed itself and wasn't guided by the soul, and the soul couldn't distinguish between cooking and medicine, but the body judged them and the criterion for judgment was the bodily pleasure they provided, then Anaxagoras' word, which you, friend Polus, are familiar with, would prevail, chaos would return, and cooking, health, and medicine would blend into an indiscriminate mass. And now I have explained my idea of rhetoric, which is to the soul what cooking is to the body. I may have been inconsistent in giving long speeches while not allowing you to speak at length. But I think I can be excused because you didn't understand me and couldn't use my short answers, so I had to explain further. And if I am unable to make use of your answers, I hope you will speak at length. But if I understand you, please be brief, as that is fair. Now, you can do whatever you want with my answer.
What do you mean? Do you think that rhetoric is flattery?
No, I said it is a part of flattery. If at your age, Polus, you can't remember. What will you do when you get older?
Are good rhetoricians looked down upon in states because they are considered flatterers?
Is that a question or the beginning of a speech?
I am asking a question.
Then my answer is that they are not looked down upon at all.
How can they not be looked down upon? Don't they have great power in states?
Not if you mean to say that power is a good thing for the one who possesses it.
That's exactly what I mean.
Well, if that's the case, then I believe that they have the least power of all citizens.
What? Aren't they like tyrants? They can kill, rob, and exile anyone they want.
By the gods, Polus, I can't understand if you're giving your own opinion or asking me a question each time you speak.
I am asking you a question.
Yes, my friend, but you're asking two questions at once.
How is that?
Didn't you just say that rhetoricians are like tyrants and that they can kill, rob, or exile anyone they want?
I did.
Well, then, I say that you asked two questions in one, and I will answer both of them. Rhetoricians and tyrants have the least power in states, as I said before. They don't do whatever they want, but only what they think is best.
Isn't that a great power?
Polus has already said the opposite.
I did. I believe that power is a good thing for the one who possesses it.
And would you argue that if a fool does what he thinks is best, it is a good thing? Would you call that great power?
I wouldn't.
Then you must prove that the rhetorician is not a fool and that rhetoric is an art and not flattery. If you can do that, you will have refuted me. But if you can't, then rhetoricians who do what they think is best in states, and tyrants, won't have anything to congratulate themselves on. If power is indeed a good thing, then doing things without wisdom is an evil.
Yes, I admit that.
So how can rhetoricians or tyrants have great power in states unless Polus can refute Socrates and prove that they do as they please?
This guy.
I'm saying that they don't do as they please. Now, refute me.
Haven't you already said that they do what they think is best?
And I still say that.
So, they do what they please?
I deny that.
But they do what they think is best?
Yes.
That, Socrates, is absurd.
Good words, good Polus, as I may say in your own unique style. But if you have any questions for me, either prove that I am wrong or give the answer yourself.
Very well, I am willing to answer so that I can understand what you mean.
Do people appear to you to desire what they do or desire some other outcome for which they do something? For example, when they take medicine at the doctor's orders, do they desire the act of drinking the medicine, which is unpleasant, or do they desire health, which is the reason they drink it?
Clearly, they desire health.
And when people go on a voyage or engage in business, they don't desire the action they are doing at the time. Who would want to take the risk of a voyage or the trouble of business? Instead, they desire wealth, which is the reason they go on a voyage.
Certainly.
And is this universally true? If someone does something for the sake of something else, they desire not what they are doing but what they are doing it for.
Yes.
And are all things either good or evil, or somewhere in between and indifferent?
Yes, Socrates.
Wisdom, health, and wealth, for example, you would call goods, and their opposites, evils?
I would.
And things that are neither good nor evil, and sometimes have qualities of both good and evil, or neither, like sitting, walking, running, sailing, or wood and stones, you would call these things neither good nor evil.
Exactly.
Are these indifferent things done for the sake of the good, or is the good done for the sake of the indifferent?
Clearly, the indifferent things are done for the sake of the good.
When we walk for the sake of the good, believing that it is better to walk. And when we stand for the sake of the good, right?
Yes.
When we kill, exile, or take someone's possessions, we believe it will benefit us, right?
Yes.
Those who do these things do them for the sake of what is good.
Yes.
And didn't we agree that when we do something for the sake of something else, we don't desire the things we do, but rather the other thing for which we do them?
That's true.
So we don't simply desire to kill, exile, or take someone's possessions, but rather we desire to do what benefits us. If the action doesn't benefit us, we don't desire it. We desire what is good for us, but we don't desire what is neither good nor evil, or simply evil. Why are you silent, Polus? Am I not correct?
You are correct.
Therefore, we can conclude that if anyone, whether a tyrant or a rhetorician, kills, exiles, or takes someone's possessions, thinking it is in their own interest when it really isn't, they can be said to do what seems best to them?
Yes.
But if they do what is evil, can it be said that they do what they desire? Why aren't you answering?
Well, I suppose not.
So, if great power is indeed good, as you agree, will such a person have great power in a state?
No, they won't.
Then I was correct in saying that a person may do what seems good to them in a state, yet not have great power and not do what they desire.
Oh, as if you, Socrates, wouldn't want the power to do what seems good to you in a state, rather than not. You wouldn't be jealous when you see someone killing, taking, or imprisoning whoever they please, would you?
Justly or unjustly, do you mean?
In either case, shouldn't they be equally envied?
Stop, Polus.
Why stop?
Because you shouldn't envy wretches who shouldn't be envied, but rather pity them.
Are the people I mentioned riches?
Yes, certainly they are.
And do you think that someone who kills another person as they please, and kills them justly, is pitiable and wretched?
No, I don't say that about them. But neither do I think they should be envied.
Weren't you just saying that they are wretched?
Yes, my friend, if they unjustly killed someone, in which case they are also to be pitied. And they shouldn't be envied if they justly killed them.
At least you will agree that someone who is unjustly put to death is wretched and pitiable?
Not as much, Polus, as the person who kills them, and not as much as the person who is justly killed.
How can that be, Socrates?
It can very well be, because committing injustice is the greatest of evils.
But is it the greatest? Isn't suffering injustice a greater evil?
Certainly not.
So, would you rather suffer than commit injustice?
I wouldn't like either, but if I had to choose between them, I would rather suffer than commit.
Then you wouldn't want to be a tyrant?
Not if you mean by tyranny what I mean.
I mean, as I said before, the power to do whatever seems good to you in a state, killing, banishing, doing whatever you like.
Well then, my esteemed friend, when I have stated my opinion, you can respond to me. Imagine that I go into a crowded marketplace carrying a dagger. Polus, I say to you, I have just acquired remarkable power and become a tyrant. If I believe that any of these men you see should be killed, the man I want to kill is as good as dead. And if I want to break someone's head or tear their clothes, it will happen instantly. That is the extent of my great power in this city. And if you don't believe me, and I show you the dagger, you would probably reply, Socrates, anyone can have great power in that way, they can burn any house they want, and the Athenians' docks and warships, and all their other vessels, whether public or private. But can you believe that merely doing as you think best is great power?
Certainly not that kind of doing.
But can you tell me why you disapprove of such power?
I can.
Why, then?
Because someone who does as you say would surely be punished.
And punishment is an evil?
Certainly.
And you would agree once again, my good sir, that great power is a benefit to a person if their actions turn out to their advantage, and that is the meaning of great power. If not, then their power is an evil and not power at all. But let's look at the matter from another perspective. Don't we acknowledge that the things we were discussing, the infliction of death, exile, and deprivation of property, are sometimes good and sometimes not good?
Certainly.
We can assume that you and I agree on that?
Yes.
Then tell me, when do you say they are good and when do you say they are evil? What principle do you establish?
I would rather, Socrates, that you answer that question as well as ask it.
Well, Polus, since you want my answer, I say that actions are good when they are just and bad when they are unjust.
You are difficult to refute, Socrates, but couldn't a child challenge that statement?
Then I would be grateful to the child, and equally grateful to you if you can refute me and save me from my foolishness. I hope you will refute me and not tire of doing good for a friend.
Yes, Socrates, I don't need to look far or appeal to ancient times. Recent events are enough to refute you and prove that many wrongdoers are happy.
What events are you referring to?
I assume you know that Archelaus, the son of Perdiccas, is now the ruler of Macedonia?
I have heard that he is.
And do you think he is happy or miserable?
I can't say, Polus, because I have never met him.
Can't you tell whether a man is happy without knowing him?
Definitely not.
So, Socrates, you would say that you don't even know whether the great king is happy?
That is true. I don't know about his education and sense of justice.
Is all happiness determined by these factors?
Yes, Polus, that is my belief. I argue that good and kind people are happy, while unjust and evil people are miserable.
So, according to your belief, Archelaus is miserable?
Yes, my friend, if he is wicked.
I cannot deny that he is wicked. He had no right to the throne he now holds. He was the son of a woman who was a slave to Alcidas, Perdiccas' brother. So, in strict terms, he was also a slave to Alcidas. If he had done what was right, he would have remained a slave and, according to your belief, been happy. But now he is unspeakably miserable because he has committed terrible crimes. First, he invited his uncle and master, Alcidas, to come to him, claiming he would restore the throne that Perdiccas had taken. After entertaining them and getting them drunk, he put them in a wagon and carried them away at night, then killed them to get rid of them. Even after committing these wicked acts, he never realized that he was the most miserable man and showed no signs of remorse. Shall I tell you how he demonstrated his lack of remorse? He had a 7-year-old brother, the legitimate son of Perdiccas, who rightfully deserved the throne. But Archelaus didn't want to raise him properly and return the kingdom to him because that was not his idea of happiness. Not long after, he threw his brother into a well and drowned him, claiming to his mother Cleopatra that he had fallen in while chasing a goose and died. As the greatest criminal among the Macedonians, he can be considered the most miserable and not the happiest. I'm sure there are many Athenians, including yourself, who would rather be any other Macedonian than Archelaus.
Polus, I initially praised you for being a rhetorician rather than a reasoner. I suppose this is the kind of argument you think a child could use to refute me and claim that the unjust man is happy. But my dear friend, where's the refutation? I cannot accept anything you have said.
That's because you don't want to accept it. You must surely think as I do.
Not at all, my simple friend. It's because you are trying to refute me in the way that rhetoricians do in courtrooms. They believe they have refuted the other party when they present numerous reputable witnesses to support their claims, while their opponent has only one or none at all. But this kind of proof is worthless when the aim is to find the truth. A person can often be overwhelmed by a multitude of false witnesses who appear respectable. In this argument, almost everyone, Athenians and foreigners alike, would be on your side if you brought witnesses to disprove my statement. You could summon Nicias, the son of Niceratus, along with his brothers who donated the row of tripods in the Dionysus precinct. Or you could summon Aristocrates, the son of Celius, who made the famous offering at Delphi. You could even summon the entire Pericles family or any other prominent Athenian family you choose. They would all agree with you. I am the only one who remains unconvinced because you have not convinced me. Even though you produce many false witnesses against me in the hope of depriving me of my inheritance, which is the truth. But I believe that I will have achieved something worthwhile if I make you the sole witness of my words, and you make me the sole witness of yours. The rest of the world doesn't matter. There are two ways of refutation, one that belongs to you in the general world, and one that belongs to me. Let's compare them and see how they differ. We are discussing matters that are honorable to know and disgraceful not to know. Knowing or not knowing happiness and misery is the most important of these matters. What knowledge can be nobler? What ignorance can be more disgraceful than this? So, let me start by asking you whether you believe that an unjust person who commits injustice can be happy, since you believe that Archelaus is unjust, yet happy. Can I assume that this is your opinion?
Certainly.
But I say that this is impossible. This is one point on which we disagree. Very well. And do you also believe that if he faces retribution and punishment, he will still be happy?
Certainly not. In that case, he will be most miserable.
On the other hand, if the unjust person is not punished, then, according to you, he will be happy.
Yes.
But in my opinion, Polus, the unjust person or the doer of unjust actions is miserable in any case. They are more miserable, however, if they are not punished and do not face retribution, and less miserable if they are punished and face retribution from gods and men.
You are proposing a strange idea, Socrates.
I will try to make you agree with me, my friend, because I consider you a friend. So, these are the points on which we disagree, correct? I was saying that doing injustice is worse than suffering injustice.
Exactly.
And you said the opposite?
Yes.
I also said that the wicked are miserable, and you refuted me?
By Zeus, I did.
In your own opinion, Polus.
Yes, and I rather suspect that I was right.
You also said that the wrongdoer is happy if they are unpunished?
Certainly.
And I affirm that they are most miserable, and those who are punished are less miserable. Are you going to refute this proposition as well?
This proposition is harder to refute than the other, Socrates.
Say rather, Polus, impossible. Who can refute the truth?
What do you mean? If a person is caught in an unjust attempt to become a tyrant, and when caught, they are tortured, mutilated, have their eyes burned out, and after suffering great injuries, and seeing their wife and children suffer the same, they are finally impaled or burned alive, will they be happier than if they escape and become a tyrant, and continue to do as they please and hold the reins of government, being both envied and admired by citizens and strangers? Is that the paradox that, as you say, cannot be refuted?
Again, noble Polus, you are creating imaginary creatures instead of refuting me. Just now, you were calling witnesses against me. But please refresh my memory a little. Did you say in an unjust attempt to become a tyrant?
Yes, I did.
Then I say that neither of them will be happier than the other. Neither the one who unjustly acquires a tyranny, nor the one who suffers in the attempt. For of two miserable people, one cannot be happier than the other. Are you laughing, Polus? Well, this is a new kind of refutation. When someone says something, instead of refuting them, you laugh at them.
But don't you think, Socrates, that you have been sufficiently refuted when you say something that no human being will agree with? Ask the others in the company.
Oh Polus, I am not a public figure. Just last year, when my tribe was serving as prytanes, and it was my duty as their president to take the votes, I was laughed at because I couldn't do it. And since I failed then, you must not ask me to count the votes of the company now. But if, as I was saying, you have no better argument than numbers, let me have a turn, and you can try the kind of proof that, in my opinion, is necessary. I will present only one witness to the truth of my words, and that witness is the person I am arguing with. I know how to take their vote. But I have nothing to do with the many, and I don't even address them. May I ask if you will answer in turn and have your words put to the test? Because I truly believe that you, me, and every person actually believe that doing injustice is a greater evil than suffering injustice, and not being punished is better than being punished.
And I would say that neither I, nor any person, would you yourself, for example, rather suffer than do injustice?
Yes, and you too. I believe that every person would.
Quite the opposite. Neither you, nor I, nor any person.
But will you answer?
Of course, I will. I am curious to hear what you have to say.
Then tell me, and you will know. Let's suppose that I am starting from the beginning. In your opinion, Polus, which,